Assalamualaikum. Welcome back to our subject ECLE 2223 Language and Literacy in Early Childhood Education. For this week, for this topic, we are going to look at topic 3 Developing Listening and Speaking Skill. So first things first, let's look at the learning objective for this topic. By the end of today's topic, you are expected to be able to first identify types of listening, and then secondly, create a creative listening and speaking activities. So first things first, let's us look at discuss the definition, what is listening. Okay, so basically listening is our ear respond to the sound wave. Okay, so this sound wave, okay, this sound goes to the brain and become organized in relation to past experiences. Okay, so let's see what are the correlation, the relation between ears and sound wave. Okay, so sound wave actually stimulates the ear, and then it goes to the brain, and then the brain will process this sound, okay, by relating them to our past experiences. Okay, so the sound will be captured by the ear and then transmitted into the brain. So if you can recall back from our first topic, we talked about the three-step process, how people acquire language. Okay, so of course it will start by listening. Okay, then the sound wave, okay, the sound wave will be captured by the ear and then transmitted into the brain. Okay, then what will happen next? The brain will process and interpret the sound, drawing and calling back on their past memories. Okay, drawing on past knowledge and experiences, and will give the meaning. Okay, so this process will emphasize on the role of environment, okay, and experiential learning in auditory development. All right, so in order for the brain to organize and give meaning, it relates to the past experiences. Secondly, listening cannot be forced. Listening is a natural process. Okay, so listening cannot be forced, but it can be encouraged through a meaningful experiences. Okay, listening is an intrinsic ability, it's a natural ability that develops naturally when children are provided with encouraging, engaging, and stimulating auditory experiences. Okay, so you can do activities such as storytelling, music, listening activities, okay, or even conversational interaction. Okay, so all of these activity will help foster the children love for listening. So as a teacher, uh, caretakers, caregivers, okay, you can nurture a listening environment, a listening friendly environment, rather than you force the children for their attention. Okay, and then thirdly, okay, it's the setting, the environment place, okay, that probably limit the stimulation, okay, and you can control the size of group are desirable. Okay, setting or the environment. Looking at the environment, what are the role of the environment to the children's listening skill? Okay, so environment or the setting that limit the stimulation, okay, uh, and also a control group size is actually an ideal for enhancing listening skills for children. Okay, so your environment, your settings, you must control all of that stimulation. Okay, this stimulation can include the distraction, okay, the sounds, the visual, all right, all uh, the material tools around, maybe the toys. Okay, so this can create a lot of stimulation. So in order for you to create a role, an environment that is enough with stimulation, moderate stimulation can. So you need to look into all of these factors, all right? So, an environment with minimal distraction will help children to focus better on sound and verbal instruction. Imagine when you are to conduct a lesson and it required a lot of listening. However, there's also a lot of sound from the environment. There is a sound of musical instrument. There is a sound of vehicle outside. There is a sound of children playing outside. So all of this stimulation, overstimulated, can distract children's attention. Okay, therefore, it's important for you all to make sure that the environment has a minimal distraction, so you can help children to focus better. Okay, so if they focus better, then they can develop more listening skill. So smaller group setting. Okay, smaller group setting will also enable children to interact more effectively. And children can also absorb all the auditory input without feeling overwhelmed by all of the distraction. Okay, so look into your environment and places if you want to conduct a listening lesson. Okay, for example, you might want to create a quiet reading corner or maybe a small group singing session. So you can actually focus to the group, and children can also develop a better focus and better focus and better outcome. Okay, and then the one, two, three. Okay, the fourth one is about phonemic awareness. Okay, phonetic instructional activity and phonemic awareness. Okay, so preschool activity. Okay, you can include, or you should include, okay, this phonemic awareness and phonetic instruction. Okay, so in your school activity, okay, focus on word parts and also alphabet sound. We know that for phonemic, it's about sound. Okay, so children won't be able to develop the next language element. Okay, if they do not develop their listening skill. Okay, because phonemic awareness, it involves their understanding about individual sound in the word. If they cannot listen to the sound properly, therefore they cannot express the word. Okay, so it's important for them to have all of this awareness in order for them to develop their listening skill. Okay, so phonetic instruction teaches the relationship between letters and the sound. Okay, the letters A should produce what kind of sound, which will be supporting their early reading skills. Okay, so you can include activities such as rhyming games, uh, segmenting the words, okay, into sound. For example, suku kata, okay, and also matching letters to sound. Okay, and then finally, okay, the practical apa tu? I also cannot see this, okay? During preschool involves children understanding about words, word parts, and also alphabets, names, and sound. Okay, so it's important for children to have understanding about words, word parts, alphabets, names, and also sound. How can I move this? No, boleh move. All right, so as a teachers, find a practical strategies. Okay, if you want to teach them about listening, there's a lot of strategies that you can do, such as you can play games. Okay, have a controlled environment. Okay, include phonetic awareness activity. Okay, and then finally, of course, you need to make sure that children um, develop alphabet recognition. Okay, so, in listening, there is objective that children need to achieve in order for them to be a good listener. Okay, so these are the objectives that we try to achieve for children. Okay, so for the first one is sustaining their attention span. Okay, sustaining the attention span, all right, is because we want to foster their listening and auditory skill. Okay, so the goal is to help children maintain their focus and auditory stimuli for extended period of time. Okay, so we want them to listen to us throughout the lesson session. Okay, bukan 5 minit saja, bukan 2 minit saja. Okay, we want them to have a long period of attention span. Okay, why we want to have a long period of attention span? Because we want to strengthen their ability to stay engaged in the lesson. Okay, during conversation or throughout a storytelling session. Okay, and the most importantly is for them to understand and to follow instruction. Okay, so we want them to sustain their attention span. Okay, how can you do this? All right, you can use strategies such as storytelling, listening to music, okay, or even some games, okay, such as guided listening games. Okay, and then secondly, we want them to follow direction and command. So how can they follow direction and command if they cannot listen? Okay, so the goal is to enable children to process and act on verbal instruction. Okay, we give them verbal instruction, they listen, then they can respond appropriately. Okay, so that is the goal. Okay, we want them to follow instruction or command. Okay, we want them to follow instruction or command so that they can process and respond appropriately. Okay, so this is essential for classroom behavior, essential for them adapting to the daily routines or daily interaction. So how can you do this? Okay, you can practice through repetition. Okay, you can practice through repetition or start with a simple commands, all right, like pick up the toys, put it back. Okay, so this actually a multi-step direction lah. Okay, so do it repetitively. Okay, and then the third one is imitating the sound. Okay, so in order for them to be a fluent speaker, they first need to listen. Okay, listen, and then we want them to imitate the sound. Okay, so the goal is to support the development of speech and phonemic awareness. Okay, this is very important to build foundation skill for language and literacy by mimicking sound. Okay, we teach them the sound of A. What is the sound for letter A? The sound is A. But if they cannot listen to what we say, what we apa tu, what example we give to them, okay, therefore they cannot imitate the sound. All right, so this is a crucial foundation crucial skills, okay, for language and literacy. Okay, so they need to mimic the sound, they need to imitate the sound. Okay, so what can you do? Okay, you can include activity like games activity like echo games, rhythm clapping games, sounds of animals. All right. Now, next one is identifying and associating sound. Okay, this is very much related to the children cognitive ability. Okay, but this is also important for the next stage in their literacy. This helps them in their reading skills. Okay, so identify and associate sound. Okay, this the goal is for the children to recognize, okay, and relate the sound to the source of meaning. Okay, when they hear the sound, they know what is the sound representing. Okay, this is very crucial for understanding their environmental cues. Okay, this sound belongs to what item, for example. Okay, and also important for them to build their vocabulary. All right, so when they see things, okay, then when they hear things, they know that things is belong to what item. For example, a bell. Okay, they hear the sound ding. Okay, they know it's the sounds of bell. Okay, not only they understand the sound ding is for bell, but they also be able to pronounce the word bell. Okay, so what can you do? You can play sound identification game, guess the sounds of animal, and so on. Okay, and then the one, two, three, four. The fifth objective is for them to use their auditory memory. Okay, using the auditory memory. Okay, auditory memory. Um, uh, it categorize it conclude no categorize termasuk, okay, termasuk di dalam recall memory lah. Okay, auditory memory. Okay, so the goal is for us to them to be able to recall, okay, to recall and then use that auditory information. If they hear the sound ding, okay, I pernah dengar bunyi ni. Okay, I know that this sound is belong to a what item. Okay, so this is important to strengthen their memory for instruction, vocabulary, and also for them to communicate. Okay, so there's a lot of way how you can teach them by using how you can achieve this objective, and there's a lot of strategy that you can use to achieve this objective. Okay, one of it is by, of course, children who does not love games, can you can do memory based games, all right, and so on. And lastly, we want them to be able to discriminate between sound. Okay, we want them to develop the listening skills so that they can discriminate between sound. Okay, uh, discriminate between sound based on the sound characteristic. Okay, so what are the sound characteristic? Such as intensity of the sound, okay, the pitch, high or low of the sound, and also the tempo, fast or slow of the sound. Okay, so the ability to develop auditory discrimination, okay, discriminates, is so critical for their language and music appreciation, especially if the child were to learn music. They need to know the differentiation, okay, between fast and low tempo, high and low sound, and so on. Okay, so these are the objectives that we want the children to achieve when they learn listening skill. Okay, now listening skill. Okay, listening skill is the children's first language. Okay, so we look a listening skill as an art skill to learn. Okay, it is the first step in language development. Okay, listening skill is the first step in language development. Okay, so it helps, okay, children to develop before a child speaks. Okay, listening skill actually develop before a child speak. So it's a first language, uh, it's a first language skill, okay, a child develop even before the child speak. Okay, so listening, okay, it's a foundation. Okay, listening is the foundation for speaking, reading, and writing. Listening is the foundation in language learning. Okay, so before you can speak, before you can read and write, it starts with listening. So listening, it start as early as infancy. Okay, as early as in the womb. Okay, so it begins from infancy actually. For example, baby will respond to the sound and voices around them. Okay, so it starts early. So the experience, okay, early learning experience will have a significant impact to children language acquisition and comprehension skills. All right, so it's very important. Okay, we need to establish this skill before we can move forward to the next step, to the next steps. Okay, so hearing is a process. Okay, it's a process involve nerve and muscles that will eventually mature at the age of 4 to 5. So at this age, the children auditory system will reach to adult efficiency. They should have an efficient auditory system when they reach the age of 4 to 5. Okay, so when children reach the adult efficiency, this will enable children to process sounds more effectively. Okay, because hearing is essential for listening, but it can be refined through practices. So please not to expect by the age of 4 to 5 you expect them to have all of this skill automatically. No. Okay, although they have reached the adult efficiency, however, it can be refined more through practices. Okay, so you can do activity like musical play, sound camp, storytelling, and all. Okay, and then listening skill will impact children's social interaction. Okay, listening affects social interaction. Strong listening skill will enable for better communication because they will be able to understand what the other person is telling, okay, what the other person is demanding, so they can respond better. So strong listening skills will enable for better communication, which, okay, it helps to foster a healthy relationship with their friends, with the people surrounding them. Okay, what happen if you have a poor listening skill? Okay, it may leads to misunderstanding, or maybe this child will have a social challenges. Okay, because they cannot comprehend, they cannot listen what the others is saying, therefore they cannot respond appropriately. Okay, so teaching active listening will help children to interpret the social cues around them and respond appropriately. All right. And then we goes to passive and receptive. All right, so in listening also we have passive and receptive. Okay, these skills involve listening and taking in the sound. Okay, listening and taking in the sounds of word without actually responding actively. Okay, they listen, they understand, but they respond passively. Kan dia tak respond actively in speaking. Okay, so that is passive and receptive. For example, children usually will take in information and learn through observation. Okay, so the teacher explaining, they observe, however they did not respond actively in speaking. Okay, so they receive and act passively. Okay, so this will involve active thinking and interpretation, whereby we know listening is more than just hearing. Okay, so they listen and they start to process all of that information lah. Okay, and then next one, it involves active thinking and interpretation. Of course, it's very much related to passive and receptive lah. Okay, and then children attract to sound. Okay, on pleasurable or rhythmic. Okay, whatever is available. So children naturally attracted to sound. Since they were baby, they would respond to the sound. What are they doing? Like if they hear a sound, they will turn their heads towards the sound. Okay, so children are naturally drawn to pleasurable or rhythmic sound. Okay, sound can come from the environment, toys, or even self-created sound like throwing a toys or banging their legs to the cribs and so on. Okay, so from this sound that is happening around them, it will create a natural interest. So this natural interest will eventually encourage for listening practice and skill development. Okay, so in listening skills, right? What can we do to enhance their listening skill? Of course, okay, provide the children with rich auditory experiences like giving them music, stories, opportunity for conversation. Okay, then we can engage children in sound discrimination activity such as game, okay, matching sound games. Also, don't forget that environment is very important. To develop the listening skills. So create a quiet environment to focus on listening. And of course, lastly, encourage active participation such as asking questions about what they hear and so on. So these are the example of activity, okay, suggested activity that you can do with the children, okay, for hearing and guess the word here. Now, these are also some of the activity skills, okay, suggested Okay, what are the purpose to increase the child ability, follow direction, and so on. Now, let's look at how to improve listening skill. These are some of the suggestions and tools that you can use to improve the children listening skill. Okay, how to foster effective listening skill in young children. Okay, first you can use audio resources. Okay, incorporate engaging materials such as story, song, listening to games to capture the children attention. For example, you can use audiobooks, read aloud books. This is widely available in the net. Okay, so you can use this. You can use nursery rhyme or the sound discrimination or identification activity. So this all of these resources will help children to associate sounds with meaning, improving both listening and also comprehension. Okay, and then but you have to be aware of the stages of attention in development. Okay, although children hearing maturity should be there at the age of 4 to 5. Okay, however, you want to start early, but be aware of the children developmental stages. Okay, when we work with children, we always have to remember about the developmental appropriate practice. Okay, so same goes to when we want to improve children listening skill. Okay, be aware of their developmental stages. Understand that children attention span will grow gradually with age and practice. So you don't expect baby at the age of 6 months or 12 months will have the same attention span like children at the age of 5 or 6 years old. Okay, so that attention span, their listening skill will grow gradually with age and practices. Okay, so plan your activity. Okay, plan age appropriate listening activity that is matched to the children developmental stages. For example, you can start with a short simple instruction for young children, and then you progress to more complex tasks as the children mature. Okay, then plan activity to encourage children to evolve in listening skills. Okay, attention, such as attention. So you plan with engaging listening activity. You can design a fun, interactive activity to hold on children interest. Okay, you don't create just because it's a listening activity. Then you create a lesson that requires children to listen only. You might lose their interest. So design a fun and also interactive. Okay, two-way communication. So two-way communication activities, okay, so that you can hold the children interest to listen to you. All right, for example, story circle time, then you include open-ended question in between. Okay, or you can ask them to guess what will happen later. Or you can do musical games like freeze dance, musical chair. All right. So this will encourage for sound awareness. But of course, it will always come from model. Children see, children do. So as an adult, be a good role model. Okay. Show active listening by giving full attention to the children when you speak. Okay. Sure, give your fullest attention when you speak to children. Okay, basically. All right. I know with the current situation, most of us we juggle two, three tasks at one time, and we tend to be busy. Okay, so when children are speaking to us, talking to us, we tend to not giving them our fullest attention because we are too busy, isn't it? So if you want children to improve their listening skill, to develop their listening skill, you have to be a good role model. You show to them. Okay, you show your fullest attention. Okay, then children will follow. All right, so show active listening by giving full attention when the children speaks. Okay, you avoid interrupting. Okay, if someone is interrupting, you tell them to wait until you're done with this child. Okay, you demonstrate how to listen thoughtfully and respectfully. It goes by model. Children see, children do, they will imitate. Okay, and then the next one, um all right, uh contact easily. Okay, or is it, I cannot see. Okay, and use their name to prompt their attention. Okay, this is one of the technique to promote attention and engagement by using eye contact and calling out their name. Okay, so you establish eye contact. Okay, so this eye contact will signal your attentiveness and will help children to focus because they know you are giving them the attention. Okay, so use their name before speaking prompts to tune in. Okay, you call out, for example, Ali, look at me, I need your help with this puzzle. Okay, so you give them the eye contact and then you call out their name. Of course, another factors that you need to put into consideration is the environment, because prepared environment will contribute to the skills. All right, so you prepare the environment that will contribute. You reduce the distraction, all of the sound that is not contributing. Okay, you reduce all of the sound. Okay, you minimize all the background sound. Okay, you minimize all the visual clutter. Okay, so that children can focus. So this will create a conducive environment for listening and focus. Okay, so what kind of environment? Okay, preferably a quiet area. Okay, or a hideaway spaces. Okay, so that the children can feel calm and focus. So you design a specific space for quiet activity like reading or storytelling, or maybe a cozy environment which encourage relaxation, okay, and focus listening. All right, for example, a small tent, a soft corners with a cushion, okay, cozy, okay, that is quiet and good for listening. Okay, so you might want to avoid all of this distraction. Okay, you limit noises such as TV, nowadays screen, we don't want screen, put away the screen. Okay, loud conversation, if there is teacher having loud conversation outside in the hallway, you might want to tell them, be quiet a little bit. Okay, or maybe some other children is having loud conversation, so tell them, okay, to slow down, to lower down. Okay, so that we can have this listening focus activity. Also, as a teacher, you need to provide clear and consistent instruction to help children focus, because they need to understand what is your demand. Okay, all right, so provide a clear and consistent instruction so you can help children to maintain focus. All right. All right, so basically, to improve listening skill, it goes by, it can be built through strategies, okay, engaging activities and also supportive environment. So by combining all of these techniques, we can enhance children listening skill, attention span, okay, and overall communication activity. All right. Okay, these are some of the activity that you can conduct in order to teach or to enhance children listening skills, such as you can hide a picture, all right, and then you can give the clue by using a verbal instruction. Okay, now moving along to speaking skills. All right, so what is speaking skill? It's basically the ability to speak confidently and fluently. So this will allow us to communicate effectively. Okay, so speaking confidently and fluently will enable for effective communication. Okay, because speaking is actually a process. Okay, it is an interactive process. Okay, where information is being shared. Okay, and also followed by an action. Okay, you need to send your message. Okay, and then when people understand, then it will be followed by action. Okay, it will give appropriate response. Okay, so speaking is not just about expressing your thought. Okay, so it involve in two-way communication, engaging the listener and uh, ensure that they understand what are you trying to say. Okay, so it's just not speaking is just not like vomiting your words, right? So you need to make sure that the other person, okay, um, the other listening the other listener, okay, understand what are you trying to say. Okay, so it's not just about expressing your thought. You also need to make sure that the other party understand what you are saying. So in order to do this, it requires a confident clarity. Okay, it have to be clear. What you say, it have to be clear, and the ability to adapt to the audience situation. Okay, you see, might probably this person unable to hear effectively, so you might want to adjust how you speak to them, or might probably the other person is deaf, okay, but they can read your lips, so you might want to improve how you move your mouth, for example. Can it have to be clear? All right, now let's look at what are the importance of listening skills. Okay, these are some of the activity that you can do. But before that, let's us discuss the importance of a listening skill. Okay, just now we talk about listening. Let's us discuss what are the importance of speaking skills. Okay? So these two is actually interrelated. In order for us to have an effective communication, it requires both a speaking and listening. Okay, so speaking and listening goes hand in hand, interrelated, to foster a meaningful communication. Good speaker and also good listener. Okay, so when these things combine, okay, it means that they understand how to respond and when to pause. So during conversation, okay, the ability to listen carefully will help the speaker to actually address the listener concern and also interest. Now, the fourth one is getting attention in a respectful way by saying, excuse me. Okay, so uh, use polite expression like excuse me. All right, so respectful, gaining attention, show your courtesy and consideration. Okay, so in in speaking skill, okay, in speaking skill also help you to get attention in respectful way. Okay, so you use all of this polite expression, okay, such as excuse me, thank you, and so on, instead of just interrupting. Okay, and also maintain your eye contact. Okay, focus on what we want to talk about. Okay, so eye contact help to establish connection, okay, which ensure the listener is actually engaging. Okay, so when speak is not just about speaking, we want to make sure the other party is also engaging and listening to us. So what way you can do, another way you can do is by establishing your eye contact. Okay, maintain your eye contact. It helps you to establish your connection, okay, making sure the other person actually is also listening and engaged. Okay, it's also signal focus and intent when we are speaking. Also, okay, interaction, okay, requires taking turns, okay, talking and listening. We need to know when to stop, when to listen. So you take turns while talking and when talking and listening. Effective communication always involve knowing when to speak and when to stop and let others to respond, because it's interactive, it's two-way. Okay, so for example, during a group discussion, so each of you can wait for your turn and share your thought. So if everyone were to talk at the same time, nobody will listen. Okay, and that's basically it's lah. Okay, in terms of a speaking skill, right? So how can you develop this confident and fluency? All right, you can take some strategies. Okay, you can consider some strategies to improve your speaking skill. Okay, for example, you might want to practice speaking in different setting. Okay, so you encourage children to speak in both a formal and also informal setting. How are they supposed to speak if they're in a if there are informal settings such as in a class, in a school, or in a formal occasion, and how they can speak in informal settings such as at home with friends and so on. Or maybe you can use strategies such as role playing games, okay, or of course you can also model an effective communication skills. All right, these are some of the activity that you can do with children, okay, to practice their speaking skills, such as say it out activity. Okay, you ask the children to read out a phrase, okay, to read aloud a story or a phrases. Okay, so in speaking, there is element that you need to pay attention to. Okay, so the first element of speaking skill is the vocabulary. Okay, vocabulary is basically words for expression. Okay, so building vocabulary, okay, it starts from single words to long sentences. Okay, vocabulary development begins with understanding a single words. Then it progresses to a whole meaningful sentences. Okay, so remember the 1, 2, 3 rules. Okay, 1 year old will say one word, 2 year old will say two words, 3 years old, and so on. They will say more and more longer sentences. So in vocabulary, always starts with single words, then gradually it will add on. Okay, for example, children will learn the word apple, and later on, when they grow older, they'll be able to construct a sentences such as "I want an apple." Okay, and then secondly, understand the meaning and pronunciation of words. That is necessarily for communication. So it's included. It's related to vocabulary. Okay, children need to understand, they need to know what is the word mean and how to pronounce them correctly. This will ensure clarity in communication. Okay, they want to say I want an apple, but they don't know how to pronounce the apple clearly. They don't know what is the word apple means, but they want apple. Okay, so if they don't understand the meaning and the pronunciation, they cannot um, send the idea, they cannot express their needs and so on. Okay, so it's important for them to know what is the word mean and how to pronounce them correctly to ensure clarity in communication. Okay, they must know what is the meaning and the pronunciation of the word so they can communicate. Of course, okay, in vocabulary, they'll be able to use the right word at the right time. Choosing words that fit the context will improve precision in their speaking. For example, using happy for casual situation. Okay, using sad for a sad situation, for example. Okay, and also they need to understand of tenses and the correct way to structure a sentences. Okay, tenses such as past, present, and future tenses. Okay, use the correct tenses will help children to convey when an action is actually occurring. Okay, occurs. Okay, correct. Use the correct tenses to describe. Okay, when this particular situation is happening. For example, you want to tell them that you playing something, but it happened yesterday. So what? How do you say it? You say I played yesterday. You want to tell them that it's happening now. You will say I am playing now. That is the present tense. But you wanted to say that you will be playing tomorrow. So how do you say I will play tomorrow? Okay. So using grammar, okay, using grammar help you to structure your sentences correctly. Okay, understand grammar. Okay, it helps you to structure the sentences. Okay, provide you with the rules. Okay, with the rules to organize the words in a proper manner. Okay, If you were to organize the word different structure, it might probably bring to a whole different meaning. Okay, for example, you want to tell someone is going to the park. She is going to the park. Okay, so it does bring a meaning that this person is going to the park. But if you were to say she's going is park to the two, okay, so it's not in the correct sentences. The other listener, the other party, the other person might not understand what you're saying. Okay, so it's important for children to have a proper um, grammar. Okay, grammar is a part of their speaking skills. Okay, now integrating vocabulary and grammar. Okay, this is happening when you want to combine the words and construct a structure. Okay, then this will help in children to be effective speaking. Okay, whereby the words and sentences has a rich vocabulary and a proper grammar structure. Okay, now another element in speaking is the pronunciation. Okay, so pronunciation, it has few rules. Okay, pronunciation is about saying the word correctly and ensure others understand. Okay, so how they develop a good pronunciation? Of course, it is learned by listening to those around them. Okay, so you model a good pronunciation, then the children will learn. Okay, of course, understanding the small unit that make up a spoken language. All right, so pronunciation will involve recognizing and articulate, okay, phonemes. Okay, uh, pronunciation, it goes by small units in the words. Okay, setiap suku kata, bunyi-bunyi suku kata di dalam satu perkataan. Okay, so you need to pronounce them, articulate them in a proper way. Okay, uh, need to understand the words how will it sound. Okay, yes, not the words. Okay, suku kata. Okay, then you need to articulate. Okay, you need to understand. Okay, that these small units, okay, will make up a spoken language. Okay, of course there is activities, okay, that you can do to develop, okay, this pronunciation. Okay, and then from pronunciation it will lead you to fluency. Okay, fluency, okay, practicing speaking skills every day will lead you to fluency. Okay, so fluency developed with consistent speaking practice in everyday conversation. That's why when you want to learn about language, you want to be good in a new language, you need to practice, speaks it, okay, say it every day. Then you will get the fluency. Okay, because fluency develop with consistent speaking practice in everyday conversation. Okay, for example, you can encourage children to share their daily experiences with their peers or family members. You encourage them to speak out. Okay, or you can do activity such as reading out loud. Okay, so reading out loud can help children to improve their fluency by combining the vocabulary, pronunciation. Okay, for example, you can ask the child to read a short story. Okay, read aloud a short story. Okay, focusing on the pacing and expression. Okay, so you want to children develop the fluency. Okay, children also need to know about the past. They don't have to read it out loud so fast that they tend to mispronounce. Okay, so reading out loud, yes. Okay, so we can practice with all of this activity. Now, okay, you can also combine pronunciation and fluency. Okay, so this will to help children to have more accurate pronunciation and smooth fluency. Okay, when you combine these two together. Okay, accurate pronunciation and smooth fluency work together to make speech or your speech more effective and engaging. Okay, some activity or tips that you can do, yes, of course, you can expose them to a fluent speaker, or you can do games like tongue twister, okay, and encourage for regular speaking opportunities with their friends, or maybe do some presentation or group discussion. All right. Now, these are some of the activity that you can do for yourself to practice, or also with the children. Okay, some example of tongue twister phrases activity. All right. Okay, so I let you all to try this at home by yourself. That is all for our topic today for Unit 3. I hope you have some takeouts from this pre-recorded. Until next unit, see you again. Bye bye. Thank you.